Dear colleagues, I welcome you in my video presentation dedicated to one aspect of teaching classroom theory, namely a keyboard and ear training component. After decades of teaching theory, harmony, classical form, counterpoint, in the United States and in the Soviet Union, in Russia, I came up with a firm belief in the necessity to incorporate keyboard and ear training directly into classroom teaching. So in the following video you will see how I set up a classroom and how the system that I devised works. It's rather simple system. It's available. It doesn't require any specific equipment or investments. So this is my classroom. I'm using a projector, which is bright link projector. It recognizes the stylus, so I can draw on the screen with the stylus using different tips, different shapes and colors over any image, including PDF image of a score or any notation software. And then it's all recorded and saved on my hard drive. I also use a camera, video camera fixed above the keyboard. I've been using this for 15 years at least. Now, at the time of pandemics, it's easily transformable into distant learning, synchronous distant learning system. So the idea is that my students, when they learn something in harmony, counterpoint, or classical form, or any device, for example, a digression from tonic to the dominant, using secondary dominant. The students learn it on paper, as it's common, but they also have to try this in the classroom. A student comes and plays an exercise, and his hands at the keyboard are projected onto the screen. Other students sit and watch. They watch, listen, and they learn from this. They learn from their classmate. The next thing that will happen, I'll ask another student. And by the way, by the end of the class, the last student normally plays the exercise brilliantly without a single error. That note D can be harmonized differently. See that? It can be listened. Every class meeting begins with oral analysis, oral ID of chord progression. Sometimes I give intervals. Sometimes I ask students to solfegize. So oral skills is included, definitely. But I emphasize keyboard exercises, and it doesn't matter if a student is a piano player. I enjoy teaching, especially students who are not pianists. So in a semester, when I teach classical forms, I ask students to play harmonic progressions, and I ask them to turn them into something like a motif. Well, but so many of these harmonic progressions are motivic. They're short, and they're based on optimal voice leading. So these are equivalents of partimento. It has been discussed in literature. Arensky and other Russian teachers have used this. Short harmonic progressions that are proven in history of music. As I call them golden nuggets. So a student has to be able to play a short harmonic progression, maybe in transpositions as well.
Uh-huh. Very, very, very beautiful, very beautiful. Let us raise the stakes, Ben. Can you play that same thing in D major? The same thing in D major. So, okay, so D major, yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Woo! And goes to C sharp and A. Yeah. Well, play it one more time. The last chord. Yes. Yes, and then this A major. Yeah, right there.
Building upon such a successful performance, I asked the same student, in this case Mr. Ryan Yakos, to compose a longer harmonic progression in the form of a period. I'm using the model of Riemann, a metric period, 8 measure long structure with half cadence in measure 4, perfect authentic cadence that occupies 2 measures, number 7 and number 8. And I ask students to compose a progression like that and to memorize it, to be able to play in different keys. This is called the method of template period, which is not used in the United States, but it's something that I brought in from my experience of studying and teaching in Russia.
I'm ready.
Ready?
Yeah. Excellent, excellent.
This rather simple exercise is very useful, very practical as well. A student gets to know harmony. It's a first-hand experience of harmony. It's very different from paper theory or organ theory, which unfortunately we adhere to in academia nowadays. And nothing would keep a student from introducing any device, any harmonic device, any contrapuntal device, any formal device into this template. For example, right before the perfect authentic cadence, a student can introduce a German augmented sixth chord. He or she can introduce modulations within this period form. So it's a very useful tool of learning harmony, form, and styles as well, because you can improvise the same period form in more romantic style, or add some stylistic elements of a certain composer, favorite means of expression, and so forth. This, however, is not the end. When I teach form, I suggest that students try adding a small B section. We have two types, standing on the dominant and the sequence. They learn this all in theory, but there is an opportunity for every student to try it, to try it at home and in the classroom, in front of their classmates. So here is the example of improvised classical composition in large ternary form. Some students progress faster, some slower, but I noticed that so many of them are capable of building up from period to rounded binary or small ternary form, and then after some period of time they become capable of improvising a large ternary form with modulation towards the second theme, presentation of second theme in a smaller form, and returning modulation. This one is performed by student, Harry Lang. Two students who kindly agreed to share their presentations are not pianists.
There you go.
This last example has never been written down. All teachers are complaining about students being attached to notation and not being able to improvise and compose in the freestyle. So I insist that my students should be able to improvise form, to improvise harmonic progressions. I'm trying to detach them from notation for some time. Of course, later on, I would ask a student to write the composition, and I don't mean to completely abandon notation, but considering the fact that we teach in the university environment and not in the old-fashioned conservatory style, and most of the time we deal with students who start quite late. There is a deficiency that music theory and consequently approach to music becomes very paper oriented, based on visual orientation, less and much less based on oral, which is ultimately important for a musician. This exercise that Harry Lang has played still reveals some knowledge, profound knowledge of structure. For example, if you noticed, his small B section is based on sequence, and that sequence nicely, organically brings in the recapitulation of the rounded binary form. And this recapitulation is actually a half of a period, initial period, but it has this closing character. Then he introduces the middle section or middle part of the large ternary form without any transition by mere apposition of keys, but he introduced a returning modulation, quite advanced, I should say, and that's what makes this form very convincing, and ultimately based on the same structural knowledge that we are trying to instill in our students by using purely visual methods. Thank you very much for your attention.